Have you ever hit a wall? I mean, a real, solid, seemingly insurmountable wall in your learning journey? Perhaps you were trying to master a new language and, for months, you felt like you were soaring. Words came easily, grammar started to click, you were having basic conversations, and then, suddenly, nothing. Stagnation. The process grinds to a halt. You're stuck on what feels like an endless plateau, looking up at a peak that seems to be getting further away. Or maybe it was learning a musical instrument, coding, or even a new skill at work. You put in the hours, you do the drills, but the needle just won't move. In that moment of frustration, what's the story you tell yourself? Is it, well, I guess this is it. This is as good as I'm going to get. I've reached my natural limit. Or is it, I'm just not cut out for this? Some people are born with a talent for languages or music or math, and I'm not just one of them. What if I told you that the wall isn't real? What if I told you that the single biggest obstacle standing between you and the next level of mastery isn't your aptitude, your intelligence, or some innate God-given talent? What if the obstacle is a single, powerful, and deeply ingrained belief you hold about yourself? Welcome, my friends, to the first episode of Lifelong Learning, the theme for this week on English Plus Podcast, in which I'm going to help you become a more effective, curious, and resilient learner in every aspect of your life. Today, we're starting at the very foundation, the bedrock upon which all future learning is built. We're talking today about your mindset. Well, this isn't just some feel-good pop psychology. This is about the fundamental operating system of your brain. In this episode, we're going to dissect the two core beliefs that govern our approach to challenges, failure, and success. We'll be exploring the groundbreaking work of psychologist Carol Dweck to understand the profound difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. We're going to tackle some burning questions, like why do some people seem to relish challenges while others shrink from them? What is the invisible force that causes us to plateau in our skills, and how can we shatter that ceiling? How can a simple shift in our internal monologue, the very words we use to talk about ourselves, radically transform our ability to learn complex skills, especially something as notoriously tricky as a new language? And most importantly, is it truly possible to change a mindset that has been with you your entire life? My friends, we'll journey into the fascinating world of neuroplasticity, discovering how our brains are not static, unchangeable organs, but dynamic, malleable structures that physically change and grow with effort. The idea that you can literally build a better brain is not science fiction. It's a biological reality we can all harness. But this isn't just about theory. I'll provide you with the practical tools to begin identifying your own fixed mindset triggers and consciously choosing a growth-oriented response. This is more than just an interesting concept. It's a call to action. It's an invitation to re-examine the very stories you tell yourself about your own capabilities. Know this though, a single podcast episode is just a doorway, not the entire house. True knowledge, the kind that rewires your brain and reshapes your life, doesn't come from quick fixes or summaries. It comes from grappling with ideas, from deep reading, from personal reflection, and from the diligent application of what you've learned. So consider this episode the catalyst for your own deeper exploration. So if you're ready to stop seeing walls and start seeing hurdles, if you're ready to unlock a level of potential you might not have known you possessed, you're in the right place. Let's begin the journey of building the learner's mindset. Today's our first episode in our lifelong learning, not series, it's just a theme for this week. And this episode is all about the learner's mindset, unlocking your brain's full potential. And don't forget that because we're English Plus Podcast, of course, we're going to discuss some key vocabulary and phrases that are going to help you take your English as well to the next level. I'm Danny, and this is a new episode from English Plus Podcast. All right, let's dive right in. Now, picture two students. both sitting in a challenging advanced mathematics class. The professor hands back the first major exam. Both students look down at their papers and see the same grade, a C-. A disappointing result for two bright, capable individuals. The first student, let's call her Amelia, sighs. Her shoulders slump. The voice in her head says, "See, I told you. I'm just not a math person. I've hit my limit. I should probably drop this class before I completely tank my GPA. It's clear I don't have the math gene." Amelia puts the test in her backpack, feeling a sense of shame and finality. For her, this grade is a verdict, a judgment of her innate ability. The second student, let's call him Ben, also feels a sting of disappointment. A C- is not what he was hoping for. But his internal monologue is radically different. He thinks, okay, a C-, well, that's rough. But it shows me I clearly didn't prepare the right way. I need to figure out what I don't understand. I'll go to the professor's office hours, maybe from a study group, and I'm going to review every single problem I got wrong until I understand the concept behind it. This grade isn't a reflection of who I am. It's a reflection of my current strategy, and my strategy can change. Amelia is operating from what Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck has famously termed a fixed mindset. Ben is operating from a growth mindset. And this single difference in perspective is arguably the most powerful predictor of their future success. Not just in this math class, but in virtually every endeavor they undertake in life. This is the foundational concept we're unpacking today. Because before we can talk about learning techniques, memory palaces, or productivity hacks, we have to talk about the fundamental belief system that either allows those tools to work or renders them completely useless. So, what exactly is a fixed mindset? A fixed mindset is the belief that your basic qualities, like your intelligence, your personality, or your talent, are simply fixed traits. You're born with a certain amount, and that's that. The goal in this worldview becomes to constantly prove your intelligence or talent and to avoid looking dumb at all costs. When you believe your abilities are carved in stone, every single task, every challenge becomes a test. Will I pass or fail? Will I look smart or dumb? Will I be validated or exposed as a fraud? This leads to a whole cascade of detrimental behaviors. People with a predominantly fixed mindset tend to avoid challenges because a challenge carries the risk of failure, and failure is devastating. But why? Because in their view, failure isn't just an outcome. It's a direct and permanent indictment of their core abilities. It means they aren't smart or talented enough. They also tend to give up easily when faced with obstacles. The first sign of trouble, that C- on the exam, becomes a giant stop sign. The internal logic is, if I had the ability, this would be easy. Since it's hard, I must lack the ability. Effort itself is seen as a bad thing. If you have to try hard, it must mean you're not a natural. Think of the myth of the brilliant artist or musician who just effortlessly produces masterpieces. A fixed mindset buys into this myth completely. Furthermore, people in a fixed mindset often ignore useful negative feedback. Criticism is perceived as a personal attack, not as a source of information for improvement. And perhaps most tragically, they can feel threatened by the success of others. When a peer succeeds, it highlights their own perceived deficiencies, making them feel jealous and insecure rather than inspired. And now let's pivot to the other side of the coin, the growth mindset. A growth mindset is the belief that your most basic abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work. Brains and talent are just the starting point. This view creates a love of learning and a resilience that is essential for great accomplishment. For someone like Ben, our math student, life isn't just about proving he's smart. It's about getting smarter. That C- isn't a verdict, it's data. It's valuable information telling him where he needs to focus his energy. This mindset fosters a completely different set of behaviors. People with a growth mindset embrace challenges. They see them as opportunities to stretch themselves, to grow, to learn something new. An obstacle isn't a reason to quit. It's a puzzle to be solved. They understand that effort is not a sign of weakness, but the very path to mastery. Effort is what activates your ability and turns it into accomplishment. They actively seek out and learn from criticism and negative feedback. They don't necessarily enjoy it. I mean, let's face it, no one loves being told they're wrong, but they see its value. They understand that the person giving them constructive feedback is offering them a gift, a roadmap to getting better. And they find lessons and inspiration in the success of others. Instead of feeling threatened, they think, wow, what they accomplished is amazing. How did they do it? What can I learn from their process? The implications of this are frankly staggering, and they're backed by decades of research. Dweck and her colleagues have studied this in children, in athletes, in Fortune 500 companies. The results are consistent. A growth mindset leads to higher achievement, greater motivation, and lower stress across the board. But you might be thinking, okay, this sounds nice. It's a positive way to think. But is it real? Can you really get smarter? Well, the answer comes from the world of neuroscience, and it's an unequivocal yes. And the magic word is neuroplasticity. Now, for a long time, the prevailing scientific view was that the adult brain was largely a fixed entity. You developed a certain number of neural connections in childhood and adolescence, and then it was pretty much downhill from there. We now know that is profoundly wrong. Neuroplasticity is the brain's remarkable ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections throughout life. Think of your brain not as a stone tablet with knowledge etched into it, but as a dynamic, living ecosystem of connections, like a dense forest. Every time you learn a new skill, engage in a new thought pattern, or practice something, you are blazing new trails in that forest. When you first try to learn, say, a new chord on the guitar, the neural pathway for that action is like a faint footpath someone walked once. It's weak and inefficient. But as you practice that chord over and over again, you are repeatedly sending signals down that same path. Your brain responds by strengthening that connection. The neurons involved in that task create more robust links. The path gets wider and more paved. It gets insulated with a substance called myelin, which acts like the rubber coating of a wire, allowing the electrical signal to travel faster and more efficiently. What you are literally doing is building the physical structure of that skill into your brain. Effort isn't just some abstract concept. It is the physical act of neurological construction. This is why the growth mindset isn't just a nice philosophy, it is an accurate description of how the brain actually works. The belief that you can grow and change is the psychological fuel for the biological process of growth and change. A fixed mindset, conversely, cuts off this process. If you believe you can't learn, you won't put in the effort. And if you don't put in the effort, your brain won't build the necessary pathways. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now let's bring this home to a challenge many of you are likely facing: learning a new language. Language acquisition is perhaps one of the most common areas where we encounter the dreaded learning plateau. You start with a language, and the initial process is thrilling. You go from knowing 0 words to knowing 100. You learn to say hello, my name is whatever, and where's the bathroom? It feels like you're a genius. This is the honeymoon phase. But then you hit a point where the gains slow down. You're trying to understand complex grammar, subtle nuances in vocabulary, and the rapid-fire speech of native speakers. You make the same mistakes over and over. Your accent feels thick and clumsy. Well, this is the moment where your mindset is truly tested. The fixed mindset voice kicks in with a vengeance. I'll never sound like a native. My brain is just too old to learn a language. I don't have the ear for it. I've hit my talent limit. All these things. Well, this mindset fixates on the gap between your current ability and the fluent ideal. It sees this gap as a chasm, a permanent failure. So, what happens? You stop taking risks. You avoid speaking for fear of making mistakes. You stick to the simple phrases you know. Now, you might even quit altogether, concluding that you're not just a language person. The growth mindset, however, sees this plateau completely differently. It reframes the situation not as a limit, but as a new and more interesting phase of learning. The growth mindset voice says, okay, my progress has slowed, which means the strategies that got me here are no longer sufficient for the next level. What new strategies do I need? My pronunciation of this "the" sound is difficult. Let me find 10 videos on how to produce it and practice it in front of a mirror for 15 minutes a day. I keep confusing these two verb tenses. Let me write 50 sentences using them until it becomes automatic. The growth mindset focuses on the process, not the perceived gap. It embraces the mistakes as diagnostic tools. Every time you say something incorrectly and get corrected, it's not a moment of shame, it's a golden learning opportunity. A neuron just fired incorrectly, and now you have the chance to help it fire correctly the next time. The growth mindset understands that fluency isn't a destination you magically arrive at. It's the cumulative result of thousands of tiny adjustments, corrections, and persistent efforts. It's about being willing to sound silly today in order to sound fluent a year from now. So how do we actively cultivate this? It's not a switch you flip overnight. Most of us are a mixture of both mindsets in different areas of our lives. You might have a growth mindset about your career, but a fixed mindset about your artistic ability. The first step is simple awareness. Start by listening to your own internal monologue. When you face a setback, what is the voice in your head saying? Is it a judgmental voice of a fixed mindset or a compassionate, process-oriented voice of a growth mindset? Just noticing it is a huge step. The second step is to consciously reframe your thoughts. The key is to add the word "yet" to your fixed mindset statements. When you catch yourself thinking, "I can't do this," consciously add that little word. I can't do this yet. I'm not good at this yet. I don't understand this yet. This simple addition is incredibly powerful. It transforms a statement of permanence into a statement of process. It acknowledges the present reality without closing the door on future possibility. It reframes you as a work in progress, which is exactly what a lifelong learner is. Third, start celebrating the process, not just the outcome. Instead of only feeling good when you get an A, praise yourself for the rigorous study plan you followed. Instead of just focusing on the finished painting, value the courage it took to face the blank canvas and the hours you spent practicing your brushstrokes. When you reward effort, persistence, and good strategies, you reinforce the neural pathways of the growth mindset itself. This shift from a fixed to a growth mindset is the master key that unlocks every other door in your learning journey. It is the permission you give yourself to be a beginner. It is the resilience you build to weather the inevitable storms of frustration. It is the deep-seated belief that your potential is not something to be discovered, but something to be developed. It is the very essence of what it means to be a lifelong learner. Your brain is built for growth. The only question is whether you believe it. And so, my friends, that's just the introduction, as I promised, but that's not the end of the episode, of course. We're going to focus on language because, remember, we're English Plus podcast. We covered the plus part where we take your knowledge to the next level, but now we're going to focus on the English part where I take your English to the next level. That's coming next. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. Alright, that was a deep dive into the theory of mindsets, and I hope it got your gears turning. Now we're going to shift our own gears a bit and zoom in on some of the specific language we used. Well, this section is all about equipping you with the vocabulary and confidence to not only understand these concepts on a deeper level, but to talk about them fluently and persuasively in your own conversations. I'm going to dissect some key words and phrases, explore their nuances, and then put them in practice with a little speaking challenge. Now let's start with our very first and our most central word, mindset. M-I-N-D-S-E-T, mindset. Now we've been throwing this word around a lot, but let's really break it down. A mindset is more than just an opinion or a mood. It's a deeply held belief or a way of thinking that determines your behavior, your outlook, and your mental attitude. Think of it as the default setting or the operating system for your brain in a particular area. In this episode, we talked about the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset. Now, notice how it's not just a fixed thought, but a whole set of interconnected beliefs. You could use it in many contexts. For example, you might say, to succeed in a startup, you need an entrepreneurial mindset, one that is comfortable with risk and uncertainty. Or you can say, he approached the negotiation with a very adversarial mindset, seeing it as a battle to be won rather than a problem to be solved. Well, my friends, mindset is a fantastic word to describe a person's entire worldview or approach to something. Now let's move on to the next word. Beautiful and powerful word. This one is cultivate. C-U-L-T-I-V-A-T-E, cultivate. In the episode, I said, so how do we actively cultivate this? Now, of course, the original meaning of cultivate is related to farming, to prepare land and grow crops. And that's a perfect metaphor. You don't just get a growth mindset, you cultivate it. The word implies a slow, deliberate, and nurturing process. It involves effort, care, and attention over time. It's the opposite of a quick fix. For example, you cultivate a skill, you cultivate a relationship, you cultivate a reputation. We can use that word and say, for example, she cultivated a reputation for being meticulously honest in all of her business dealings. Or, to become a good writer, you need to cultivate a daily reading habit. It suggests a process of intentional growth which fits our theme perfectly. So that was about cultivate. Now let's move on to talk about a term I used a lot in this episode, and it's a very common experience for many of us, and this one is learning plateau. Learning, you know how to spell it, but let me spell plateau for you. P-L-A-T-E-A-U. Learning plateau. Now, a plateau in geography is an area of flat, high ground, and that's exactly what it feels like in learning. A learning plateau is a period where your progress seems to stop or stagnate after a period of rapid improvement. It feels like you're walking on flat ground, putting in the effort, but not getting any higher. It's a point of major frustration for learners. You could say, for example, I was making great progress with my Spanish for 6 months, but now I've hit a learning plateau and I feel stuck. Or, many weightlifters experience a plateau where they struggle to increase the amount of weight they can lift. Now, recognizing that this is a normal part of the process is a very growth mindset way of thinking. The fixed mindset sees the plateau as the final destination. The growth mindset sees it as a sign to change strategies. So that's about learning plateau. Next, let's talk about another word. It's innate. I-N-N-A-T-E. Now, I mentioned that a fixed mindset is the belief that your intelligence or talent are innate abilities. Now, innate means inborn, natural, something you have from birth rather than something you've learned. It's often used interchangeably with inborn or inherent. For example, people often talk about an innate talent for music or an innate sense of direction. Now, the entire theory of growth mindset challenges the idea that ability is purely innate. It argues that while we may have innate predispositions, our actual abilities are built. Now, be careful how you use this one. Saying someone has an innate talent can sometimes unintentionally diminish the massive amount of effort they've put in. You could say, for example, while he has an innate curiosity, his expertise is the result of years of dedicated study. Okay? So that's about innate. Next, I used a phrase that's very interesting. That's a self-fulfilling prophecy. I said that a fixed mindset can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Well, this is a fascinating psychological concept. A self-fulfilling prophecy is a prediction that directly or indirectly causes itself to become true, due to the simple fact that the prediction is made. This happens because our beliefs influence our actions. For example, if you believe you're going to fail an interview, that's the prophecy, you might get nervous, not prepare well, and answer questions poorly. These are your actions. As a result, you don't get the job, thus fulfilling the original prophecy of failure. In our context, if you believe you can't learn something, that's the fixed mindset prophecy, you won't try hard, you'll avoid challenges, and you won't learn. Your belief creates the reality. And my friends, this is a powerful concept to use when discussing psychology or social dynamics. For example, we can say, the rumor that the company was going bankrupt became a self-fulfilling prophecy as panicked investors pulled their money out, causing it to actually go bankrupt. So, that's self-fulfilling prophecy. Next, let's look at another word, and this one is detrimental. 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 Now, I described the cascade of detrimental behaviors caused by a fixed mindset. Detrimental is a more formal and powerful way of saying harmful or damaging. It's a great word to have in your vocabulary for more academic or professional writing and speaking. It comes from the same root as detriment, meaning harm or damage. So you could say, a lack of sleep can be detrimental to your physical and mental health. Or, the new policy has a detrimental effect on employee morale. Well, this word adds a degree of seriousness to the negative consequence you're describing. So, that was about detrimental. And now let's talk about another great verb we use, and this one is embrace. A growth mindset embraces challenges. Now, to embrace something means to accept or support it willingly and enthusiastically. It literally means to hold someone closely in your arms as a sign of affection. And that physical sense of acceptance and warmth carries over to the metaphorical meaning. It's not just about tolerating challenges, it's about welcoming them. It's an active, positive verb. Now, you can embrace a new culture, embrace a new technology, or embrace the idea of change. For example, we can say, instead of fighting the new software, the team decided to embrace it and learn its advanced features. It suggested a wholehearted acceptance. And now let's talk about a word that I talk about a lot, and this one is resilience. But, of course, this word is very important, and I will talk about it every chance I get. Now, a growth mindset builds resilience. And resilience is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. It's the ability to bounce back after a setback. Think of a rubber band. You can stretch it, but it returns to its original shape. A resilient person is like that. They can face failure, criticism, or hardship, and they don't break. They bounce back, often stronger than before. This is a core attribute of the growth mindset. For example, we can say, the community showed incredible resilience in the aftermath of the hurricane. Or, building emotional resilience is key to navigating the stresses of modern life. Okay, that's about resilience. Now let's talk about malleable. M-A-L-L-E-A-B-L-E. Malleable. Now, I described the brain as being dynamic and malleable. Now, malleable is an adjective that means easily influenced, pliable, or trainable. Its original meaning comes from metallurgy, describing a metal that can be hammered or pressed into shape without breaking or cracking, like gold. Well, this is a fantastic metaphor for the brain and neuroplasticity. It's not rigid and brittle, it's shapeable. You can use it to describe a person's character too. For example, young children are highly malleable, which is why their early experiences are so important. It implies a capacity for being shaped and changed, which is the heart of our discussion. And finally, let me talk about paradigm shift. Now, while I didn't use this exact phrase in the episode, but moving from a fixed to a growth mindset is the perfect example of a paradigm shift. A paradigm is a typical model or pattern of something. A paradigm shift, a term popularized by the philosopher of science Thomas Kuhn, is a fundamental change in the basic concepts and experimental practices of a scientific discipline. Now, we now use it more broadly to mean a major revolutionary change in thinking or a radical change in perspective. It's not just a small adjustment, it's seeing the world in a completely new way. For instance, the invention of the internet created a paradigm shift in how information is shared and consumed. Or we can say adopting a growth mindset requires a complete paradigm shift in how you view challenges and effort. It's a powerful phrase to use when you want to emphasize the magnitude of a change in perspective. So there you have it. We talked about mindset, cultivate, learning plateau, innate, self-fulfilling prophecy, detrimental, embrace, resilience, malleable, and paradigm shift. These are your tools for having a rich, nuanced conversation about this topic. Now for the fun part. Let's move into our speaking challenge. I want you to take these words and weave them into your personal story. Here's your challenge. I want you to prepare a short 2 to 3 minute story about a skill you learned. It could be anything. Playing an instrument, learning to cook, public speaking, a sport, just anything. In your story, I want you to describe your journey through the lens of mindset. Now here's a structure you can follow. First, describe the initial challenge and the innate belief you had about your ability. Was there a fixed mindset holding you back? Maybe you believed you just weren't cut out for it. Second, talk about the struggle. Describe the learning plateau you inevitably hit. How did this initial mindset make that plateau feel? Was it a wall? Did it feel like a detrimental blow to your confidence? And third, describe the turning point. What caused the paradigm shift in your thinking? Did you meet a mentor? Did you read a book? Did you have a realization? What happened? Describe how you began to embrace the process and cultivate a new approach. And finally, explain how this new mindset helped you. Talk about the resilience it gave you to push through difficulties and how you came to see your abilities as malleable. Did you realize that your initial negative belief was at risk of becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy? So, these are all just ideas, of course, but you can do it the way you want. And my friends, your goal is not just to tell a story, but to use at least 5 or 6 of our keywords naturally within that story. Don't just drop them in, make them a part of the narrative. Record yourself on your phone, listen back. Does it sound natural? Are the words used correctly? This isn't about perfection, remember, it's just about practice. It's about taking these abstract words and making them a concrete part of your active vocabulary. That's your assignment, so go find a quiet room, think of a story, and start talking. It's time to put that growth mindset into action. And now it's time for us to move to our grammar and writing section for this episode. That's coming next. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. Now that we've worked on our vocabulary and speaking, let's transition to the written word. Now, writing is one of the most powerful tools we have for clarifying our thoughts and solidifying our understanding of a concept. It forces us to move from a passive consumer of information to an active producer of ideas. So it's time for a writing challenge that will help you internalize the lessons of this episode on a much deeper level. Now here's my writing challenge for you. Write a 500-word reflective essay about a time you encountered a significant learning plateau in your life. This could be in your education, career, a hobby, or even in personal development. Your essay should have 2 main parts. First, analyze this experience through the lens of a fixed mindset. Describe the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that characterize your approach at the time. Second, reimagine the same experience from a growth mindset perspective. How would your thoughts, actions, and ultimately the outcome have been different? Well, my friends, this challenge is about more than just telling a story. It's about analysis and speculation. It's about contrasting reality with possibility. And to do that effectively, we need the right grammatical tools. So let's turn this into a mini lesson on grammar and writing techniques that will make your essay shine. The most important grammatical structure for this challenge is the conditional sentence. Conditional sentences are the language of speculation, hypothesis, and exploring alternative realities. They are perfect for the second part of your essay where you reimagine the past. There are a few types, but we'll focus on the 2 most relevant for this task: the third conditional and the mixed conditional. Now let's start with the third conditional. Now we use this to talk about an unreal or hypothetical situation in the past. The situation is impossible because it's in the past and we can't change it. It's the grammar of regret, relief, and reflection on what might have happened. The structure is not that simple, but it's not that difficult either. It's if plus the past perfect, which is had and past participle. That's in the conditional clause, and in the result clause, we have would have plus the past participle. Now, let's apply this to your essay. In the first part, you might describe your fixed mindset reality and say, for example, I believed I was naturally bad at public speaking, so avoided every opportunity to present at work. My manager noticed my lack of visibility, so I was passed over for a promotion. Now, in the second part, you can use the third conditional to reimagine this past. You could say, for example, if I had believed that public speaking was a malleable skill, that's your hypothetical past condition, I would have sought out opportunities to practice. That's your hypothetical past result. Another one. If I had embraced the challenge instead of fearing it, I might have joined a Toastmasters club. If I had done that, I would have built my confidence slowly, and my manager would have seen me as a leader. Do you see the power of that? The third conditional allows you to construct a parallel universe in your writing, directly contrasting the fixed mindset reality with the growth mindset possibility. It's the perfect tool for the reimagined part of the writing challenge. But that's not everything. We can even get more nuanced with the mixed conditional. A common mixed conditional talks about a hypothetical past condition and its present result. The structure is similar, but there's a change in the result clause. In the conditional clause with if, we still use the past perfect, had plus past participle. But in the result clause, we use would plus the base form of the verb, not the past participle. Okay? Well, this is useful for connecting a past mindset to your current reality. For example, let's continue with the public speaking scenario. Now, you could write something like, if I had cultivated a growth mindset about public speaking back then, I would be in a more senior position today. Or you could say, if I had not listened to that detrimental inner voice, I would feel much more confident in meetings now. This structure beautifully links past attitudes to present consequences, adding another layer of depth to your reflection. So, your first mission in this writing challenge is to masterfully weave in at least 2 or 3 third or mixed conditional sentences to explore the what-if scenario. But now let me give you some more grammatical tools. Let's talk about writing technique. A key part of this essay is contrast. You are contrasting 2 mindsets, 2 sets of behaviors, 2 outcomes. To make this contrast sharp and clear for your reader, you need to use effective transition words and phrases. Don't just write one paragraph about the fixed mindset and another about the growth mindset. Connect them. Show the shift. Use words and phrases like on the one hand and on the other hand. For example, on the one hand, my fixed mindset told me failure was a final judgment. On the other hand, a growth mindset would have seen it as valuable feedback. Use expressions like in contrast. You can say, my instinct was to hide my mistakes. In contrast, a growth-oriented approach would have involved sharing my struggles to get help. You can use conversely. You can say, I viewed effort as a sign of weakness. Conversely, from a growth perspective, effort is the engine of achievement. You can use whereas. You can say, whereas my fixed mindset led to stagnation, a growth mindset would have led to a breakthrough. Using these transitional devices will act as signposts for your readers, guiding them through your change in perspective and making your argument much more powerful and coherent. And finally, let's talk about the tone and language of reflection. Well, this is a reflective essay, so your writing should sound thoughtful. Use phrases that signal introspection. Instead of just stating facts, show that you are thinking deeply about them. Incorporate phrases like, in hindsight, it became apparent to me that. I've come to realize that. Reflecting on this experience, now I understand. Now, let me give you some examples. Let's start with in hindsight. In hindsight, I can see that my fear was rooted in a deeply fixed mindset. And now let me give you an example of it became apparent to me that. It became apparent to me that I was more afraid of looking dumb than I was interested in actually learning. And now an example on I've come to realize that. I've come to realize that the plateau wasn't a wall, but a staircase I refused to climb. And finally, let me give you an example on reflecting on this experience I now understand. Reflecting on this experience, I now understand the power of a simple paradigm shift. These phrases, my friends, elevate your writing from simple storytelling to sophisticated reflection. They show that you are not just recounting events, but analyzing them and extracting meaning, which is the entire point of the exercise. So let's recap your writing plan for success. First, structure your essay clearly into 2 parts. the fixed mindset reality and the reimagined growth mindset possibility. Second, use conditional sentences. Third, and mixed, to grammatically explore the hypothetical what-if scenario. This is your key technical skill for this piece. Third, employ contrastive transitions to make the shift between the two mindsets sharp, clear, and impactful for your reader. And finally, adopt a reflective tone using introspective language to show that you are deeply engaging with the concept and your own personal history. Well, my friends, this challenge is a workout for your writing skills and your self-awareness. It's a chance to apply the episode's core concepts directly to your own life, and in doing so, truly make them your own. Take your time, think deeply, and craft a piece of writing that not only answers the prompt, but also teaches you something new about yourself. I hope you enjoyed that, but we're not done with the episode. Don't leave just yet. We still have our discussion section that's coming next. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. Now, we've covered a lot of ground today, from the neuroscience of the brain to the practicalities of learning a language. But as I mentioned at the start, this conversation is just the beginning. The real learning happens when you take these ideas and grapple with them yourself, applying them to your own life and discussing them with others. Anybody, your friends, your family, people who are interested. With me, of course, if you want, on my Patreon page. And to help you do that, I will share a few discussion questions with you. Let me start with the first one. Identify your own fixed mindset triggers. In which specific area of your life, work, hobby, relationship, or fitness, do you most often hear that fixed mindset voice? What specific situations or challenges tend to trigger it? For example, is it when you receive criticism from a boss, or when you try a new complex recipe and it fails? Sharing the specific trigger can help others recognize their own. And now for my second question, the language of mindset around you. Now start paying attention to the language people around you use. Can you recall a recent conversation where you clearly heard someone speaking from a fixed mindset, saying, for example, "I'm just terrible with names"? Or a growth mindset, saying, for example, "That presentation didn't go well. I need to figure out how to be more persuasive next time." How does hearing this language in others make you more aware of your own internal monologue? And now to my third question, and in this one, let's talk beyond skills and intelligence. Now, while we focused on learning, Carol Dweck's research also applies to personality and relationships. Have you ever thought of your personality, for example, "I'm just an anxious person" or "I'm not a romantic person," as a fixed trait? What would it mean to apply a growth mindset to an aspect of your own personality or your ability to connect with others? Could you grow your patience or learn to be a better listener? Now, my answer is of course you can, but of course you will need to think about that, and you will need to come up with clear examples of how you can do this. And you can, of course. Now let me move to the next question. Reframing the role of failure. Now, our society often treats failure as something to be ashamed of and avoided at all costs. How would our education system, our workplaces, and even our family dynamics change if we collectively adopted a growth mindset perspective, viewing failures and mistakes primarily as opportunities for growth and data collection? What would a growth mindset report card or performance review look like? And now to my final question about sustaining a growth mindset. It's easy to feel motivated and adopt a growth mindset right after listening to a podcast like this. But what happens next week? When you're tired, stressed, and face a major setback? What are some concrete, practical strategies or daily habits you could implement to sustain a growth mindset and prevent yourself from slipping back into old, fixed patterns of thinking when the going gets tough? Now, take some time with these questions, my friends. There are no right or wrong answers, of course, only perspectives and experiences. Now, sharing your opinion with people, with me, might just be the catalyst for a paradigm shift in someone else's life. And of course, I look forward to reading your thoughts. And that brings us to the end of our very first episode of Lifelong Learning. We've laid the foundational, the essential bedrock of the learner's mindset. Now remember, the belief that you can grow is the fuel for the biological process that makes it happen. If these ideas resonated with you, the journey doesn't have to end here, of course. Lifelong learning is the theme of this week, and we're going to talk about it all this week. So you can find a lot on the website, EnglishPlusPodcast.com. And if you want to unlock access to everything English Plus Podcast has to offer, you can do that by subscribing on Apple Podcasts or Patreon. You can find the links in the description of the episode. And that will be everything for today, my friends. Thank you for lending me your time and your attention today. Remember, go out there, notice your mindset, add the word yet, and embrace your next great challenge. Until next time, keep learning. I'm Danny, and that was a new episode from English Plus Podcast. And remember, never stop learning. I'll see you again next time.